In the summer of 1590, Governor John White stepped ashore on Roanoke Island. 3 years earlier, he had left behind 115 English settlers, men, women, and children, with every intention of returning in a matter of months. Instead, war between England and Spain had kept him away for nearly 3 years. As White walked through the silent settlement, he found no signs of battle, no bodies, no graves. The houses had been carefully dismantled rather than destroyed. The fort stood abandoned. The only clue was a single word carved into a wooden post, Croatoan. More than 4 centuries later, historians still debate what became of the men, women, and children of Roanoke. Were they killed? Did they starve? Or did they simply disappear into a new world they had come to colonize? This is the story of America's lost colony. During the late 16th century, Europe was changing rapidly. Spain had become the richest empire in the world. Treasure fleets crossed the Atlantic, carrying enormous quantities of gold and silver from the Americas, while Spanish settlements stretched from Florida to Mexico and beyond. England watched with growing concern. Queen Elizabeth I understood that if England hoped to compete with Spain, it would need colonies of its own. Establishing settlements across the Atlantic promised not only wealth, but also naval bases, new trade routes, and a strategic foothold in North America. Among those determined to make that vision a reality was Sir Walter Raleigh. Although he never personally visited the lands that would bear his name, Raleigh became the driving force behind England's first serious attempt to establish a permanent colony in the New World. His plan was ambitious. A settlement on the coast of present-day North Carolina would provide a base for exploration, trade, and perhaps even attacks against Spanish shipping. If successful, it would mark the beginning of England's overseas empire. The location chosen for this bold experiment was a narrow island, separated from the mainland by broad sounds and marshes. Its name was Roanoke. In 1585, England launched its first expedition to Roanoke. Unlike the colony that would later become famous, this settlement was never intended to be a community of families. Instead, it was a military outpost made up primarily of soldiers, sailors, and explorers under the command of Ralph Lane. At first, relations with the Algonquian-speaking peoples of the region were cautious. Native communities possessed generations of knowledge about the land, its rivers, and its seasons. The English depended heavily upon them for food and guidance, but misunderstandings quickly gave way to mistrust. Competition over supplies, cultural differences, and English demands for food strained relations. Violence erupted, and several indigenous leaders were killed. As hostility increased, the settlement's position became increasingly fragile. The colonists faced food shortages, disease, and isolation. Relief from England failed to arrive on schedule. Then, in June 1586, an unexpected opportunity appeared. The famous English privateer, Sir Francis Drake, stopped at Roanoke following his raids in the Caribbean. Seeing the colony's desperate condition, Drake offered to take the settlers home. They accepted. England's first colony in North America had survived barely a year. Despite the failure of the first settlement, Sir Walter Raleigh refused to abandon his dream. In 1587, a new expedition sailed west under the leadership of artist and governor John White. This time, the colony was very different. Rather than soldiers, it included entire families hoping to build permanent homes. Among them were White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias Dare. Soon after arriving, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter. The child was named Virginia Dare. She became the first English child born in North America, a symbol of England's hopes for a lasting future across the Atlantic. Yet almost immediately, the colony began to struggle. Supplies ran low. Relations with neighboring peoples remained uncertain. Recognizing the danger, the settlers urged Governor White to return to England for fresh provisions. Reluctantly, White agreed. As his ship disappeared over the horizon, he believed he would return within a few months. Neither he nor the colonists could have imagined that Europe was about to change everything. As John White sailed toward England in late 1587, he expected his absence to last only a few months. The settlers had entrusted him with a simple mission: return with food, tools, and fresh supplies before another harsh winter arrived. But events unfolding thousands of miles away would make that impossible. Relations between Protestant England and Catholic Spain had deteriorated for decades. Religious conflict, piracy on the high seas, and English support for the Dutch revolt against Spanish rule had pushed the two kingdoms ever closer to war. King Philip II of Spain was determined to overthrow Queen Elizabeth I and restore Catholic rule in England. In preparation for the coming conflict, every seaworthy English vessel was pressed into national service. Merchant ships became warships. Experienced sailors were called into the Royal Navy. The Atlantic crossing to Roanoke would have to wait. In the summer of 1588, the long-expected invasion finally began. The Spanish Armada, more than 130 ships carrying nearly 30,000 men, sailed into the English Channel. Its mission was to escort an invasion army across the sea and bring England under Spanish control. For England, defeat could have meant the end of Queen Elizabeth's reign and perhaps the end of England's ambitions in North America. The English fleet, commanded by experienced captains, including Lord Howard of Effingham and Sir Francis Drake, harassed the larger Spanish formation. Using faster, more maneuverable ships, they launched repeated attacks before sending fireships drifting into the anchored Armada at Calais. Panic spread through the Spanish fleet. The decisive Battle of Gravelines scattered the Armada before powerful Atlantic storms drove many surviving ships onto the rocky coasts of Scotland and Ireland. England had survived, but victory came at a price. Every available ship remained committed to defending the kingdom. Roanoke was forgotten. Months became years. John White pleaded repeatedly for permission to return to his family. Again and again, his requests were denied. England remained on constant alert for another Spanish invasion. Only in the spring of 1590 was White finally able to secure passage aboard a privateering expedition sailing west across the Atlantic. The voyage was difficult. Violent storms battered the ships. Supplies dwindled. Yet White never abandoned hope. He imagined his daughter, Eleanor, waiting on the shore. He pictured his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, now nearly 3 years old. Soon, he believed, his family would be reunited. On August 18, 1590, his granddaughter Virginia Dare's third birthday, John White finally reached Roanoke Island. The shoreline appeared strangely quiet. No welcoming boats approached. No smoke rose from cooking fires. No voices echoed through the trees. White and his companions cautiously entered the settlement. They expected to find desperate colonists. Instead, they found no one. The houses stood empty. Many had been carefully dismantled. the wooden palisade surrounding the settlement remained standing. There were no signs of battle, no burned buildings, no scattered weapons, no bodies, no graves. It was as though the entire colony had simply vanished. White discovered the only clue. Carved into a wooden post near the entrance to the settlement was a single word: Croatoan. Nearby, the letters. Crow had been carved into the bark of a tree. Before leaving England, White had agreed upon a signal with the colonists. If they abandoned the settlement voluntarily, they would carve the name of their destination. If they had been forced to leave under attack, they would also carve the shape of a Maltese cross. There was no cross, only the word Croatoan. John White desperately wanted to search Croatoan Island, home to friendly indigenous allies whom the English knew as the Croatoan people. Perhaps the colonists had found refuge there. Perhaps his family was still alive. But once again, nature intervened. A powerful storm forced his ships back out to sea. John White never returned to Roanoke. He never discovered what had happened to his daughter, his granddaughter, or the 115 colonists he had left behind. Their fate remains one of history's greatest mysteries. John White left Roanoke with more questions than answers. The disappearance of 115 men, women, and children quickly became one of the greatest mysteries in English history. Yet for centuries, the mystery remained largely forgotten. England's attention shifted toward new colonies farther north. In 1607, the settlement of Jamestown was founded in Virginia, becoming England's first permanent colony in North America. Roanoke faded into legend. No survivors ever returned to England. No letters were found. No official record explained what had happened. Instead, historians have been left to piece together scattered clues from archaeology, indigenous oral traditions, and the writings of the few people connected to the colony. Over the centuries, many theories have emerged. Some are supported by evidence, others belong more to myth than history. Today, the theory accepted by many historians is also the simplest. The colonists may have left Roanoke willingly. The word Croatoan was not random. Croatoan Island, known today as Hatteras Island, was home to an indigenous community that had remained largely friendly toward the English. John White himself believed this was where he would find the settlers. Unfortunately, storms prevented him from making the journey. Centuries later, archaeologists began uncovering evidence suggesting that English goods reached indigenous villages along the outer banks. Metal tools, weapons, fragments of pottery. These discoveries cannot prove that the colonists lived there, but they do suggest that English settlers and indigenous communities shared the same landscape. Many historians now believe at least some of the colonists were welcomed into indigenous society, gradually abandoning their English identity in order to survive. Not every historian agrees. Some believe disease and starvation slowly weakened the colony before survivors attempted to move inland. Others suggest they traveled north in search of Chesapeake Bay, where English leaders had originally hoped to establish the settlement. Another long-standing theory claims the colonists were attacked by hostile groups. Early English accounts mention conflicts between neighboring indigenous nations, while later stories spoke of villages where people possessed unusually light skin or claimed distant English ancestry. Most historians treat these stories with caution. Many were written decades after the colony disappeared. Others relied on second-hand accounts that cannot be verified. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So far, That evidence has never been found. The search continues even today. Archaeological excavations on both Hatteras Island and the North Carolina mainland have uncovered 16th century English artifacts that may be connected to Roanoke. Researchers have also re-examined one of John White's original maps. Beneath a small patch covering part of the drawing, investigators discovered the outline of a hidden fort, a feature some believe may indicate a planned relocation site. Whether that fort was ever built remains unknown. Like so many pieces of the Roanoke puzzle, the evidence is intriguing but incomplete. Each discovery answers one question, only to raise another. More than 400 years have passed since the colonists of Roanoke disappeared. No mass grave has ever been discovered. No definitive record has ever revealed their fate. Only a weathered carving, Croatoan. Perhaps the lost colony was never truly lost. Perhaps its people survived by becoming part of a world they had once believed they would conquer. History does not always leave clear answers. Sometimes it leaves only clues, and some mysteries continue to echo across the centuries.